Good afternoon, Citrix Converge attendees. My name is Charlie Brinson, and thank you so much for joining my session. Really appreciate it. Today, I'm going to be walking through from scratch how to build a Spotify podcast microapp to enhance the learning and development of your users within the Citrix Workspace experience. So, I'm going to be leveraging the Remote Works Hybrid Survival Guide podcast from Citrix. For you, you can use anything you want. Basically, any Spotify podcast microapp would be able to be leveraged here. Tons of different options, and it just really depends on the use case you're trying to do. So one use case could be if you're trying to push information to your sales team to help them with learning and development. The daily sales tips with Scott Ingram, I haven't actually listened to it, but the idea behind it is quick 5-6 minute tips that can be ingested really quickly from a team to be able to do that on a daily basis. So he's pushing these out, quick little sessions that can be listened to and pushed out on a daily basis to your sales team. It could be the Blazing Trails podcast from Salesforce, a little bit longer in the 30, 40, 50-minute range, but at the same time very valuable to a sales team who may be looking for some new ways to be able to reach their customers and sell more products. It could be a pharmaceutical podcast. It could be an accounting podcast. Like there's so many podcasts right now, you can pretty much go through and find a use case for about any of them. But the three that we were choosing from Citrix, Tech Fusion, the ClickDown, and Remote Works. Make sure you go subscribe to all of them. The ClickDown, big fan of Anna Ruiz and Dan Feller, getting super technical on some of the stuff. But Remote Works is what we're targeting today. So what we'll be doing is trying to match the look and feel of what we're seeing within the Spotify platform. So that way it shows up similarly as a workspace micro app notification as well as a page. So I'm going to minimize the application and we're going to pop over into the Citrix Workspace builder experience for micro apps. So first we're going to click on manage. And if you don't have a Citrix Cloud account or a microapps entitlement, I'll also include some documentation. Number one, on how to be able to get a microapps developer account. Then you can also be able to get the Spotify developers account, which is for free over on their Spotify dashboard. That way you can have these two pieces of the puzzle. That'll all be included in the documentation attached to this. So we'll click Add Integration and choose to create a new integration to your HTTP web service. So here, I'm going to just use my clipboard of where I attached the Citrix Spotify podcast microapp, and then we'll be grabbing the base URL from Spotify, which is api.spotify.com/v1. I went ahead and uploaded a couple of the icons before, custom icon for Spotify, so we'll set that. And then we need to set the OAuth 2.0 as the authentication method. So from there, I'm going to go ahead and grab the authorization URL, which is going to be the accounts.spotify.com/authorize, and then the token URL, which is accounts.spotify.com/API token. And then the only thing that we'll need to do is to grab the callback URL and go ahead and copy that, because we'll need to include that into the API token once we log in on the Spotify developer dashboard. So we'll click login here with your credentials. I'm already logged in because I've done it before, and we'll click create app here. And I guess I should have copied and pasted it. So we'll just call it Spotify podcast micro app. And I'm going to just call this workspace micro app for Spotify. It doesn't matter what we type here. No end users will see it. We'll click create. And I will be deleting this after the fact, so I am going to show the client ID and client secret on this call and record it. But if you try to use it, it's going to be deleted, so it won't work. So I'm going to click Edit Settings and go to the Redirect URI and paste in that callback URL that we grabbed from over here. I'm going to add it and press Save. And now we should have all the pieces of the puzzle that will just, at least in the API token on Spotify. And now we just need to pop back over into the admin console of microapps and paste in the client ID and client secret. And that's really all you would need to do. I have been enabling some request limiting, 120 number of requests per minute. And then I've been doing a 120-second timeout. You could use a service action authentication. This could be good if you want one of your users to be able to follow the podcast in their own profile on Spotify as opposed to leveraging it in the workspace experience, or maybe tying in just some more functionality for the users to be able to manage their own playlist and a number of things. I'm going to keep it simple today. I'm just going to go with the service authentication by itself. So now I'm going to press Add Integration, which is right underneath me as I'm talking. I'm going to click Add, and then in just a second we should get a new microapp being added. One thing that we will need to do is to go back into configuration and authorize the API access. So I'll click Authorize. I'm logged in on my account already from the dashboard. I'll agree to it. And now that should pass through where I'm authorized after I click Agree. It's spinning, and we're good. All right. So everything is fantastic on that. The next step we need to do is start pulling in the tables. So the first step to doing that is to create a new data endpoint within the microapp platform. And I'm going to call this Remote Works. And then delete the S because it's just remote. It is Remote Works. Wow, I'm messing that up. Sorry. All right, so no query, no header needed on this. The only thing that we'll need to do is at the end of the request, type in shows / and then we need to find the show ID, which is going to be after show in the URL. You can also find all this from like the API if you're trying to do it that way. I just am leveraging the GUI because it's a little bit easier because I have access to it. So I'll paste that in. Boom, we're done there. And then the next step is just to generate tables and then fetch a JSON structure. So we can start to see the available markets. We can start to be able to see a lot of different information about this. And so now I just want to press Generate Tables. It's going to pull in that data structure into this microapp, into the data endpoint. And the only thing I need to do is to set a primary key on the top table. So the best unique identifier here will be ID. We'll press Save there and then click Add. So this has now created this data endpoint for Remote Works. So now we can start to be able to create the microapp. The one thing you want to do that I found is actually to kick off the synchronization. So that way you have some data being pulled in as opposed to just the tables. So right here, we could set it up to run, I'll probably have it run hourly, full synchronization, just that way every hour if a new microapp is found, a new Spotify podcast episode is found, it's going to push that change to my users when it's there. And we'll just say every hour and then press save and we're good. So now we want to start building our first microapp. And in this, right now we're just going to be focusing on doing one for remote work because that's the table we created. But we can be able to have multiple tables in the same microapp. So if I wanted to do the click down, if I wanted to do, any other Citrix podcast that there are, I have that option. But I'm going to start with Remote Works. I'm going to then go in and choose an icon for the Remote Works, and we'll just do maybe, let's see, what's a good one to do? We'll do the phone. We'll set the icon there, and then we'll press save. So now we have a couple options. I'm going to go ahead and start building just the individual episode. So we're going to just call this Remote Works episode, which is going to, in my mind, I'm thinking it's only a singular episode. And we're going to use the top table when we're selecting the fields. So we'll click Add here. And now what we're going to be doing is building out what the end user would see as a single episode. So what they would be playing it. So we'll grab the embed code because I'm actually going to be pulling the going to one of these episodes, right-clicking and choosing to embed the episode. And I could actually grab the code from here. The one thing that's a little bit different than just grabbing the full URL is I'm going to be using a different variable for each code. So I want to make sure that I have that left off, and I'm just going to pull it from the data source. So we'll go back here, insert that, or paste that, and now at the end, we're going to insert the variable. Insert a variable, but pulling it from a data column. And we're going to go down into the Remote Works episode nested table. And at this point, we're going to come in and grab the ID. So when we insert that, it's going to be referencing an embed code for that. And then one thing you may have noticed is that the recommendations on the size. So I'm just going to mirror the 232 coming from Spotify with a fixed absolute height of 232. So it should mirror that. And we should be good. The next thing I'm going to do, just to give the users a little bit of information about what the podcast episode's about, is to grab the HTML content field, drop that in. I'm going to go ahead and delete the label because I don't want them to know it's called HTML content. I'm going to go grab the nested table from episodes, and then I'm going to grab the HTML description. So now this is going to start plugging in everything that's pulled from Spotify's API, including some links and different clickable functions that the HTML is pulling in. I do like to add a back button on individual episodes, so that way users have a quick way to go back to Remote Works podcast to be able to view all of the different podcasts that are there if they don't want to listen to this one. And then, let's see, the next thing, probably the last thing, and this is optional, I like to add in a flexible grid, and I'll switch it down to 1 row and 3 columns. And what I'm wanting to do here is to add a center button. And so what I can do now is grab a button, and I want to open this up in Spotify because I'm a fan of using my own account to be able to play it. So like the idea of saying, hey, I can click on this and be able to open it up is great. And now what I would do is click on the actions. And then for the page action button, I'm going to turn that off. So that way it's going to be the button all the time. I'm going to go ahead and say go to URL. And then I'm going to insert a variable from the episodes table to an external URL for Spotify. I click insert, and I'm pretty much good to go there. One thing I want to test is make sure the embed code worked, where I can be able to preview the page. And now we see Illinois goes bigger and goes home, and all the information tied to that specific state of Illinois podcast and podcast episode. And we have the open in Spotify button, which I don't think will work. It may. Yeah, looks like it does. So all good with creating the individual episode. And now the next thing that we'll want to do is go back to pages. So I now want to add a new page. And this page is going to be Remote Works episodes. And I could call it, actually I may just call it Remote Works, which is going to be like the list of all of the different episodes. We're going to use that top table again. A detail form works for me. We'll click add. And this is the area where we're actually going to be listing out everything in a grid. So I don't care about it being named list grid. And let me move this over to this side. We're going to be going into the data source, and we're going to make sure that we're using that top table Remote Works for the data source. We're going to go to list items from the data source, and this is where we'll start pulling that information in about each of these different episodes. So we'll start with the name as the title, description, we're going to mirror the description. And as you can see, we're starting to compile the different, information about this. Metadata, I can be able to pull in, I'll probably target the release date, which is not going to show yet because I haven't adjusted it. And then for the page action, I actually want it to go to a page. So I want to go to Remote Works, and I want to go to the individual episode. So if you click on Back to Office Jitters, it's going to open the back to the Office Jitters for the user. So I can start going in and adjusting the style or the layout. The basic layout, doesn't really fit what I want to do. So I want to go down and choose some of our different options. I'm not going to use an image, partly because, let me just show you what it's going to look like. It's going to have all the same image. So I just want it to be the actual field and maybe only use one image. So I'm going to switch it to a, let's see, list thumbnail, but I'm actually going to remove the image. So that way we don't have a thumbnail. I could show the metadata, which is going to be the date in which it was released. I think I'm going to update the border and maybe add a divider. No, I think I like the border better. And actually the image won't matter because we removed it. And the metadata style, we can go text or badge. I kind of like the badge, but I want to switch it around to make sure that on the metadata, we have the date and the time format so people can know the date it was released and the time that it was published. Looks like most of them are published at midnight, but if podcasts are published throughout the day multiple times, it would be good for sequencing to know when it was released. The only other thing is I do want that single image. So I'm going to grab a static image, drop it in, and I went ahead and uploaded a URL to got a URL so I can be able to use that for the image for the Remote Works. I'm going to press center, and then I'm going to set it to medium because the large is just a little bit too large for me. I mean, you could do large or like a fixed width or full width, but honestly, to me, it's just a little bit too big to be able to run with. So play around with it. It depends on the creator, what they want. So at this point, I'm pretty much done with this. We can test it in just a minute to make sure it works. But what I want to do now is just add a notification. And so this notification is going to be referencing that same top table. And we'll call it Remote Works. We'll just say new episode because we're going to be targeting only on new records and not changed records. We'll add that. And at this point, what I want to be able to do is target the Remote Works episode. So that way, if a user is opening it up, when they click on the icon, they'll be going straight to that specific podcast and won't have to go to the table. So we're going to say new Remote Works episode. And then at this point, we can insert variables from the data table. So I'm going to be going into the episodes table again. I'm going to be grabbing the name, and I can insert that there. So Illinois goes big and goes home. I can insert the variable, try to keep it basic, go with the description, could be an option. I could also, even up here, to let people know how long it is, I could insert a variable for, let's see, let me go to the episodes table. This would be duration, but that's in milliseconds. So you may want to do some sort of, I probably don't want to tell them how many milliseconds they'll be listening to it because they may not know. But if you want to do some conversion, there could be some options within the API to break it down to seconds or minutes or get an idea of how long it would be. Yeah, so we would not include an action button to open in Spotify because we actually want them to try to leverage it from the workspace experience so they can be able to click in, stay where they're working. And then, that's about it from creating it. We do want to automatically run the event after the integration data change. And then I like to add some expirations to it. Partly if a user doesn't log in, every single day, maybe they don't want all these different episodes, piling up on them. So maybe after a time interval of 7 days after the card creation expires, or if the underlying record is no longer available. So this could be if somebody published a podcast and accidentally messed it up and then deleted it from Spotify. This would also remove that record. So if we didn't see that record the next time it's synced, it will remove that notification. So now we basically have to go up and click the save button, which is behind that. Click save, and then we should be good to test it with one more step. So after we've created it, we just need to make sure that people are subscribed to it. So you can come in and either add all users if you want everybody at the company to be able to do it, or you could add individuals or different distribution groups. We'll add Duncan Idaho from Dune to make sure he's got it, because that's who I'm going to log in with. Or we could say like microapps group A or group B or whatever you want to be able to do. Sales department, pharmaceutical sales reps, accounting team, whoever would need to be able to get this podcast. And now all we have to do is log in over on the Workspace experience, because it should all be working now. 21 minutes into this. So not that hard. I don't have much background in building out microapps, minus what I've gotten in there and learned. So let's see, Workspace standard. So let me log into my account as Duncan. And we may see a large batch of notifications coming in. Looks like they're not there yet, which is great. And then now we should be able to see a Citrix microapp, which, as long as I could have sworn that I subscribed people. All right. Fingers crossed. Let me just check one more thing on what it would be, where we'll go to Remote Works and Properties. So this is the last thing. I thought I'd done this earlier. Apparently I didn't, is to enable it as an action. And we don't want to enable the actual episode. We want to enable the overall episodes. So we'll press save there. And now I'll go back here and refresh this. And it just may take a second. So we'll just press F5 one more time. And now we can see the Remote Works Citrix Spotify Podcast Microapp, which I'll move myself over here, and should have gone with the large, because that is a little bit small. But now we can click on Back to Office Jitters. We can be able to view it. And I think on this recording, I actually can play system audio. So I'll let you hear it. But
it's
as
1941.
You can see, we can play the
England,
entire thing.
The darkest days of BC.
Skip through it.
Waymark, 30 minutes.
Do it all from Spotify. Or I can click open in Spotify. It's going to take me directly to this episode to be able to learn more, upgrade or choose which account that I have. Really a nice and easy way to do it. I don't think I'm going to get the notifications coming in, because most of these podcasts don't meet the criteria to be able to do it. But as the notifications come in, the user should be able to click on it and then to be able to go view more about it. Makes a really nice and easy way to, as an end user, just be able to view it. Again, for the action side, it doesn't matter. You could be able to have one podcast. You could have multiple. One thing I didn't do, and I'm thinking about it now, is organize it based on the release date, because this, I think, is the latest one, but then they start jumping around. So what we would do is go to Remote Works. All right, go to the pages here. We'll click on the main page, which the action page is what we want to be able to come in here and organize. And then I'll select the list and grid, go to the list data source and set order. We'll add a rule to make it so that the episode item order is by the release date precision, just in case you have more than one podcast episode released today. We'll say we want it descending, I think is the right thing. And I just need to save it. And then, let's see, let me just edit the order to ascending just to see if I mess that up. And I'll just click refresh. Don't know why it's doing that. But that's really the steps that you would take to be able to start ordering everything or basically filtering it that way. So not filtering it, but add the order. Maybe it's just a release date is what we need to be able to do. Yeah, I don't need to add the rule. Press save. 9. Okay, there we go. Looks like it finally kicked in. I'm not sure what was going on. While we're at it, we'll go ahead and make this a large icon. And we'll back out of this into Remote Works. I'll then pop over here and press F5 and refresh this a little bit so we can now see the new large icon, which is a little bit larger than I wanted, but you can always customize what you're doing. We can see the order in which it's going in. We can switch between different pages to go back and see something from a podcast from a couple, from last year to the introduction. The follow is opening in Spotify, so I could be able to come over here and choose to follow this if I wanted to, or you could set it up with that separate, I think it was a service action authorization to allow end users to be able to click and follow directly from their user. But this is really the end of it, the end of the presentation and the build. Just building it from scratch. Just know that from a simplicity standpoint, you can be able to deliver a microapp within 26 minutes, and that's also with me explaining and fixing a couple things. And if you start to do this for more than one podcast, it starts to really amplify what type of education and your learning and development you can be able to pass along to your end users if this is something that makes sense to them. So I really appreciate your time. Feel free to reach out to me via email. I'd love to be able to help out, and I will get this stuff published so that way you can be able to follow along with the documentation as well. And I appreciate y'all's time, and looking forward to being able to see you around Converge. All right, cheers, y'all.